governmental departments in the US start looking at data and do knowledge discovery, the Department of Agriculture could highly benefit from matching up their nano publications with the genetic information in the green academic institutions in the Netherlands. They can absolutely not do that today, and they would save a lot of money, so there's economic value. They could potentially discover new knowledge, we could then create value. And I make a plea for giving as much attention to that aspect as we give to the scientific aspect.
Yeah,
it's not either or, it's both.
Yeah, and I think what is so unbelievable to me is since we started this Open Facts project a small year ago, 3 companies are building applications around it when we didn't even do our public release. Yeah. That is how enormous the interest is. They say, oh, we will start with our own nano applications. So I believe that if we would do this with the semantic medline and create this highly valuable data set, minimally once set in medline, the idea of Open Facts is NLM would only host this little triple store, which is a few, 100 million triples. And we would just harvest them, make them part of the whole system, and every time that any of those functions into something, there is a citation, because you know from which article it came, but it's also recognition of NLM because they provided that subset. So the provenance of the set will always carry with it. So you get full recognition, and I think that this is really a breakthrough thinking and scalable as well, because Uniprot is publishing like 100 billion triples themselves, but they host them. But they don't do anything with them except exposing them to reason.
But I think there's a lot of advocacy
That's the idea.
and evangelizing to be done, not at the technical level, because that usually turns people off. Not the gurus in this field. They love this kind of stuff. They would love to spend hours discussing the details. But at what I would call real people's levels, you need to talk about, okay, let's assume these guys are all right and they have a breakthrough invention. Shouldn't we then be talking about policy, how we can apply this in society and have society benefit? And I think those are 2 different discussions, and it's 2 different sets of people with different skill sets and wired differently that should then collaborate in terms of this is the feed from science, this is the feed from society, and here are the policymakers, the thought leaders that can advocate this and tell us who to talk to in terms of spreading the word and making this practical. Because what can we do for you? Or what could you do for yourself using this technology? Or alternatively, is there a group of people that could go around the block and say, guys, you need to look at this, because this is really the new era of science. This is e-science and hard science, and there is no way out. Science is too complex, and too cross-disciplinary, and too super-institutional to keep doing it in your own lab. It's ridiculous. Most scientists don't want to hear that, because they still believe that their molecule and their gene is the world. But in reality, from an economic perspective, even from an economic perspective, not even from a scientific perspective, that is a ridiculous approach, because it will lead to nothing.
1 square foot of intellectual space doesn't do it anymore.
Anyway, this was my brief contribution to the non-scientific contribution to this, and a plea for application and making it real and making it land.
No, but that's absolutely right. The policymakers need to really adapt this.
Technology ready enough. As I bugged all these guys about the vocabulary is a pain point. They're convincing me it's not as much of a pain point as I've said, but
There's a lot.
It's work.
There's a lot.
a lot
It's
there.
not a pain point.
Yeah, it's work. That's right.
Tom's colleagues spent 20 years developing this unified medical language system. Well, I want a unified computer science language
But you know,
system.
there's a lot out there in ontologies, and you name it. There's an ontology out there now. You know, some of them are higher level, but there's a lot to start with.
Yeah, and you're probably using the word ontology to mean the collective terms and the basic terms.
Well, I mean, I'm using it very loosely. I mean, it means some kind of
like the
organization.
terminology system
Yeah.
with relations.
Yeah, well,
Let's not fight over the source.
Right, right.
well, but the
There's
point I'm
something
trying to
formal
make is
there,
if you
something
got 2
There must-
million concepts, but you only have 500 semantic classes,
Yeah,
The 2 million's a big number, 500 not that big. a
Yeah,
number.
but it's variable, Jordan, but there's a lot there to start with. I mean, I think that's, Elvin's term, there's work involved, sure, there's work, but it's not like it's a hopeless.
But I think what the major problem I see over the last 10 years when I've had these discussions, there's always, a couple hours on the scientific discussion and the naysaying and it didn't recognize my concept. When it comes to, okay, that's all true, but it's resolvable, but it's work. There's no intellectual challenge anymore.
Yeah.
Then you go like, okay, what does it take to do this for me? Well, it takes $25,000, I'm just making this up, $25,000 to build you a computer science source. And then you can, off to the races for NSF or chemicals. And then suddenly, no, this is the wrong example because we're at NSF. But in general, people go, I'm not sure because that's an investment. What is the benefit?
Also, Albert, what you didn't
The benefit is what we need to now make. We need to make a clear proposition. If you do this, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is now possible.
But you just mentioned one thing in that sentence that you thought was a benefit that in my context is a drawback. You said, science is done, it's just the work to getting the infrastructure built. Well, if I go to the NSF directors, they say, we don't support infrastructure,
Don't talk to
we
me.
only want to
I'll
support
give you an
research.
intellectual challenge. The thing that we were discussing about it, the hierarchy and getting the terms automatically is a scientific thing.
Oh, there's plenty of research.
We can always do
Oh, yeah.
research if you
Oh,
want,
there's
but it's
plenty.
not needed.
No, but
I think we're saying, where can you get started?
Yeah.
And what is enough to get started, and then, very.
We want to get started to the point that we get an application with low-hanging
Yeah,
fruit
right.
that CEOs or directors of agencies look and say, this is useful to me.
But what
Go
Albert
ahead
didn't
and spend a
show,
little more.
if there is a term in this application that it just showed that is not recognized, you highlight it and it adds it to the search terms, it does a full text search. So the app that would add it then to the concept picture, this is my last thing I want to show you. You see here this gene we were talking about? There is a UUID there, and you can start any new concept. I did the despotism thing myself and so on. Then we have all the also referred to as, but you see here that some of the terms come from UMLS, which is another. Some of them come from Swissprot, if you go down. So we cross-mapped Swissprot and UMLS, and some of them have been added by the community. So people can just go to a text set, this is a concept, here's my definition in the concept wiki, and then you can decide whether you want this thing in your thesaurus or not, and put it in the hierarchy. So you can do the clustering thing we discussed before lunch, get all the terms, the n-grams that according to the computer are candidate concepts, recognize them and ask people to define them in crowdsourcing. I mean, it is totally ridiculous to say that the vocabulary pain point is a showstopper. That is, if anyone says that, it's just an argument to say no to whatever other reason.
And I think you
because
need
it's
to
not.
separate
It's not.
two things. Further to your comment a minute ago. The scientific challenge is always there in terms of improvement, but when it comes to getting started with a practical application, you need to talk to the people that do the work on a daily basis. They should not be bothered with, is this really a scientific challenge or not, and if not, it's not our piece of cake. Because I'm sure that at the administrative level of document and information retrieval within your systems, there's improvement to be made that has nothing to do with funding a scientific project. It's just work to get it done. Now, once you get to a challenge, how do we create a perfect resource for science? There's two elements. If there's the work package to do it, and there's the academic challenge, how do you do that in the perfect way? And that's where Byron and Thomas come in. But it cannot happen with only academic gurus. It has to happen in tandem with executors.
And getting our footing, now, take NSF as an example. There's precious little expertise, I'd say no expertise in the building on how you might execute this and put it into use for the foundation. You have one division in size that does a little bit of support of semantic web type stuff, except they would tell you all the research is done there, we don't need to support that anymore, which is probably an overstatement. But so we need to find the right collaborators to provide an operational capability to move into something that can be an operational service as opposed to a research project. And of course, in a government agency, that means finding somebody who will work cooperatively as opposed to charge $1 billion to get something done.
There's
So-
two angles. One is just an analogy, but a lot of clinical and biology and chemistry and physics is not intellectual exercise. It is lab bench work done by assistants and professionals. That's a very large fraction of all the funding that goes into it. This is similar to that. The other is somehow connected to fast lane and things like that NSF takes such great public pride.
That's what we've been talking about, fast lane and now called research.gov,
Yeah.
that we could provide knowledge processing as opposed to a raw database.
Yeah, and I mentioned you
I
have
think this could contribute to that effort and be sold on as something they could brag about as next steps.
And what about getting a proposal into NSF, highlighting it with these terms, click the ones that are most important to find reviewers for, and get this expert finder.
This expert finder
use it to
works
find
for-
reviewers. I mean, there is
grant
all kinds
proposals.
of things that could be
Yeah,
done.
and NSF has done some work.
Well, that's the thing, my experience is that there are these little cells of this type of data mining, data management going, and no one's talking to each other. And I think these people are starting from scratch.
Chemistry tries one thing, and engineering tries something else.
The
And it's
panels
typically
could-
But who's the boss?
And it's
panels
already
could
the boss,
use
huh?
something like this online.
But I will be.
But I think it's important to not reinvent the wheel. It's a
Yes.
waste of money
Of course,
and energy.
yes.
And there's readily available stuff, and it needs to be modified, and it needs to be tailor-made for your purpose, but that again is work.
Right.
But we should also
You could
admit that
contract
when we
for
were
that.
here a few years ago, the same room
Yeah.
actually, with Julia and so on, it was like, oh yeah, we have to build this, da da da. Now, imagine, there was the PLOS article, but if you would have a grant on your screen and you have to bookmark it, you get experts
Yeah.
on that text.
You can
So
actually
we
pull
have
up-
an expert finder for you right here.
Right.
you know?
You can actually go into your database here, right online, and pull up any abstract or document in your system, and click the button, and it will do the same thing.
And you download the bookmark.
You don't have to do anything but pull up that page.
Right, because we know all kinds of divisions and programs create their own reviewer. find
Yep,
their own
everybody,
Right.
we're at the 22 farmers each
Yes.
doing their own thing level, as opposed to combining their efforts and looking for something.
But if you are able now to say, look, we can show this, for example, in two fields which are apart, like we do the chemistry part together with MLM, maybe with different thesaurus under MetaMed. We do Medline we have, so the life sciences we have, and you just show them a bookmarklet that has a different thesaurus behind it, you know, and you download, you said, you know, just go to your browser, download this piece of code, or here's a button, click it on the website. Now it inserts the bookmarklet and the whole thing works. It uses your internal browser memory.
Here's
So-
an analogy I have. Some of us were invented the internet 20 years ago, and
Al Gore.
Al, Mark, and me. And how did NSF put its oar in that water? It didn't have a thing to do with the internet. It turns out, computational scientists set up, American computational scientists set up a hue and a cry that the pesky Japanese and even peskier Europeans had access to supercomputers that American academics didn't have. So NSF created half a dozen supercomputing centers. Then someone said, well, we shouldn't make the investigators from the research campuses go to the centers, let's connect them with a network. Now, there were people pretty smart who were advising us, who knew good and well that if we got a network project going, it would be a hell of a lot bigger than connecting supercomputing centers. But that was the excuse that allowed NSF to make an investment as an ancillary project to get something else that had already been agreed to done. If we can find the supercomputer center equivalent, that the Semantic and Web can just be snuck in the door as an adjunct to make this other thing work, that would probably be the easiest way to get the job done. And so I keep thinking about where's our supercomputer project? That we can say, oh, we just have a technique here that'll.
And we use the same thread that the Europeans and the Chinese and the Japanese are doing this already very fast.
I'm trying that. I don't think I'm not. Otherwise, bemoaning the fact that Europe seems to be quite a bit ahead of us in semantic technologies. So far, the news has taken calmly.
They go, they owe us one.
Well, you guys are on to something big, and it's fun to hear you talk and watch your development, and maybe help open some doors, like you were commenting earlier, and if we can get this into, I mean, pesky NIH has grabbed a lot of the lead here that NSF should have, you see, so if we get NSF and NIH fighting about who's in the lead on applying these technologies, then that's as good as North America and Europe fighting for the lead.
Well, I think the little project that we sort of, at our level, agreed on, but we have to convince several bosses maybe here and there, is to say, if we could show that all the work that has been done on humanist, and because what Thomas showed today is in the end a culmination of 20 years of hard work. If we would say, okay, Open Facts has this big project, 20 million, but by, in literally, I think it's a 3-day project, to take the RDF tools, so they have to turn it into nano applications, minimally one time mentioned, add it to Open Facts, make a big fuss about it. You say, look how quick you can get massive added value based on 20 years of hard work in LLM.
Is that a political challenge, that you have to go through a lot of hoops to get permission to make the tuples available for such a thing? Or is it something doable?
I think it probably, actually, the hang up will be the US.
Yeah.
Because they're making it so as readily available as PubMed is.
That may be true for
I think
computer
it is.
science.
I think it is.
We use UMLS to create, you said,
Okay.
to get.
That would-
But
I
you
don't know.
Don't give UMLS to the farmer, you just
Well-
say,
How long is it take
use
to get
the nano
to,
application.
Yeah, well, what would the nano application, publication contain?
15.
Contain like triple, see, the concepts are your less concepts?
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yeah, okay, okay, all right.
Well, I think, from what I understand of the policy, so I mean, people aren't 100% sure, but, and it's SNOMED that is the major issue, because, you see, this is, in fact, probably, could be, is likely to be a SNOMED concept, so then you can take it, and, you can't have it without, because you might create, these are what I understand.
Yeah, there could
what
be
I'm told.
some derivative issues and so on, but I think creating the set and at least showing its value and then
Yes,
how we
that
deal
I-
with it,
That I
is
think,
something.
that would not be too much difficult, actually putting it out there, sort of like as freely available as Medline is, that would be a big, that'd be another issue.
But that's
But I
not
think
we're
Showing,
that we are.
just showing it though.
And also-
Showing the director.
I don't think that's too big of a problem, because I think, I said, it has to kind of go up, Olivier Bodenreiter would have to go along with this, but actually, Grant's already worked with him, and I think he probably would.
And you could put a license on those on the set as well.
Yes, right,
So-
right.
Would this be something we would want to enlist Don to be involved in?
I
or
think
would
so.
we want to do it with
Well-
him or under his radar?
I think it would be good for him to be involved, because my notion is that, I don't think he quite sees that he has something big here that could make the library look really good. I don't think, and he kind of sees that, but I don't think that really is sunk into the people, but I think that needs to be, I think if he saw that, and if this is kind of like next generation, library service,
Yeah.
Well,
So
then
we
he would
could-
probably become a fast supporter, wouldn't he?
I think he would.
Yeah, and the provenance allows
He
you.
needs to-
Let's talk about how we do this.
Yeah, that's what we need to do.
Don Lindbergh is who we're talking
Yeah, I
about,
know.
the director of.
And John van Bebbel knows him very well, my
Yes, he does, yes, he does.
So the thing is that if you would have the provenance of each of these nano applications in the open fact set, anytime anyone clicks on it, you say, now you're guided by NLM to, all this other stuff. So you have a pop-up
it's a-
of
it's a
NLM
every
every
sale.
sales.
And it will also say NLM beat NSF to it.
And then a picture of George coming in.
George wanted it. Call Al Gore.
Well, thank you, everybody, for showing
Well,
up.
thanks for having us, bring it all together, George, you're the catalyst.
Well,
Inside.
like I said before, I knew I'd enjoy hearing you guys interact,
Yeah, well,
and I did.
George, this is Mike Fitzmaurice. I've been in and out because I've had conflicting meetings. So I really want to thank Baron, Albert, and Tom for just outstanding state-of-the-art presentation. And you for asking an awful lot of questions that help me understand things a lot better.
I'm glad you joined us, Mike. Thank you for doing so.
Wouldn't miss it.
Great.
Okay.
we appreciate your comments, thank you.
We'll sign off now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yes,
Yeah, he's our United rep from ARC,
Our Midwestern
the
work